the kind of guy who gets scared easily. I've always been level-headed, even in tense situations. But that night at the gas station, it was different. That night still haunts me, and I'm not sure I'll ever shake it. It started like any other late-night drive. I was on my way to a meeting the next morning in a small town I'd never heard of, somewhere far off the main highway. My phone's GPS had taken me on back roads, cutting through miles of dark, empty countryside. It was around 11 p.m., and I'd been driving for hours, watching the gas needle slowly drop toward empty. By the time the warning light came on, I knew I had to stop soon, or risk getting stranded. Lucky for me, I spotted a gas station up ahead, a flickering neon sign barely visible through the trees. "Grady's Gas and Groceries," it read, but the letters were faded, like the place hadn't been touched in years. I pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching under my tires. The station looked run down. One of the lights over the pumps flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the cracked pavement. I didn't see anyone inside, but the lights were on, and the door was propped open. I figured someone had to be around. The pumps looked ancient, like something from a different era. I stepped out of the car, shivering a bit in the cool night air. I tried using my card at the pump, but of course, it didn't work. No surprise there. I sighed, slipping my card back into my wallet and heading inside. "Hello?" I called as I stepped through the door. The place was dead silent. No one was at the counter. The shelves were half empty, stocked with dusty cans and old candy bars. The smell inside was strange, kind of musty, like the place had been closed for a long time but somehow still open. I looked around, waiting for someone to appear from the back, but no one came. "Hello?" I called again, a little louder this time. Nothing. I should have left right then, but I was low on gas, and I didn't want to get stuck on that deserted road in the middle of the night. So I figured I'd just walk around, maybe find someone in the back or something. As I moved deeper into the store, the air grew colder. There was a low hum coming from somewhere, like an old refrigerator struggling to stay alive. The radio behind the counter was on, but it wasn't playing music, just static. That should have been my first real warning sign, but I shrugged it off. I walked up to the counter and rang the little bell sitting next to the register. The ding echoed through the store, but still, no one came out. Something felt off. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like I was being watched. Every time I turned my head, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked, there was nothing. Just those half-empty shelves and the flickering light above. That's when I heard a sound. A faint shuffle, like footsteps, coming from the back of the store. I froze, listening. The sound stopped as soon as I noticed it, leaving only the soft static of the radio. "Is anyone back there?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't like the way the place felt anymore. Something was wrong. I knew it deep down, but my curiosity, or maybe just my desperation to get gas, kept me there. I stepped around the counter, peering down the narrow hallway that led to the back room. The door was slightly open, just a crack, and from where I stood, I could see a faint light spilling out. I walked closer, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I don't know why, but the air felt heavier, like something was pushing down on my chest. As I got closer to the door, I heard that shuffling sound again, louder this time. It was unmistakable. Someone was back there. I should have left. I should have turned around, gotten in my car and driven away, even if it meant running out of gas on the road. But I didn't. I pushed the door open a little more, just enough to see inside. It was a storage room, cluttered with old boxes and cleaning supplies. There was a small, dim light hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the walls. But no one was in there. At least, that's what I thought. As I took a step inside, I noticed something on the far wall, scratches, deep gouges, like someone had clawed at the plaster. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped closer, squinting to make out the strange symbols carved into the wall. They weren't random. They looked deliberate, like they were part of some kind of pattern. That's when I heard the whisper. It was so faint, I thought I imagined it at first. But then it came again, clearer this time, like someone was standing right behind me, breathing down my neck. "Get out." I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one there. Just the empty room, the boxes, and the flickering light. The air felt colder now, almost freezing. I backed up slowly, my eyes darting around the room, trying to catch sight of whatever or whoever was there. And then I saw it. A figure, standing in the far corner, just beyond the light. It was tall, with long, thin limbs and a face I couldn't quite make out. Its eyes, if they were eyes, seemed to glimmer in the dark. I froze, unable to move, my body locked in place by sheer terror. It didn't move at first. It just stood there, watching me. Then, slowly, it took a step forward, its movements jerky, unnatural. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet as I scrambled out of the room. I slammed the door shut behind me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. "Hello?" I yelled, my voice breaking. "Is anyone here?" The store was still empty. The static on the radio seemed louder now, almost deafening. I ran to the front door, ready to bolt out of there, but when I grabbed the handle and pulled, it didn't budge. The door was locked. I yanked on it harder, panic flooding my veins, but it wouldn't open. I was trapped. That's when I heard the footsteps again. This time, they were right behind me. I turned around, pressing my back against the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was standing at the end of the aisle, its face still hidden in shadow, but I could see it more clearly now. Its limbs were twisted, its body gaunt and unnatural like something out of a nightmare, and it was getting closer. I ran toward the counter, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. My hands fumbled over the shelves, knocking over cans and boxes, but I couldn't find anything useful. The footsteps were getting louder, closer. I turned around, ready to fight, but the figure was gone. The store was silent again, except for the static on the radio. I stood there, breathing hard, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I was just tired, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something was wrong with this place, something far beyond my understanding. I needed to get out. I ran back to the door, pulling on the handle with all my strength. This time it gave way, and I stumbled out into the night air, gasping for breath. But as soon as I stepped outside, I stopped. The gas station wasn't the same. The pumps were gone. The sign was dark. The building behind me looked abandoned, worse than before, like it hadn't been used in decades. The trees around the lot seemed closer, their twisted branches hanging low, almost like they were reaching for me. My car was still there, but something felt off about it too. The windows were fogged up, and there were handprints smeared across the glass, handprints that weren't mine. I ran to the car, yanked the door open, and jumped inside. The engine started with a sputter, and I floored the gas, peeling out of the lot and back onto the road. As I drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The gas station was gone, just gone, like it had never been there. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, back on the highway, where the lights of other cars and towns made me feel safe again. To this day, I don't know what happened at that gas station. I've tried to look it up, to find out if it was real or just some hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But there's nothing. No record of a place called Grady's Gas and Groceries. No mention of it anywhere. All I know is, I'll never forget that night. And I'll never stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere again. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just enough time to fill up the tank and grab a coffee before heading back onto the highway. I was driving through the middle of nowhere, miles of empty road stretching ahead of me, with no other cars in sight. The sun had set hours ago, leaving me with nothing but the dull glow of my headlights cutting through the dark. I wasn't even sure where I was exactly, just following the GPS as it led me toward a business meeting scheduled for the next day in a small town I'd never visited before. That's when I saw the gas station. It appeared out of nowhere, a single dimly lit building standing alone in the vast expanse of darkness. A neon sign flickered weakly above it, spelling out Miller's Gas. It was an old-fashioned place, the kind you don't see much anymore, one story, with a small convenience store attached and only 2 pumps out front. The whole setup looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. I was running low on gas though, and I didn't have much choice. There wasn't another station for miles, so I turned into the lot, my tires crunching on the gravel. As I parked next to one of the pumps, I noticed that something felt off. The air was still, too still. No wind, No sounds of insects or animals, just complete silence. Even the usual hum of highway noise was gone. I glanced around but didn't see anyone. No cars, no workers inside, just the faint glow of lights spilling out from the windows. I shrugged it off. It was late after all. Maybe whoever was running the place was in the back or something. I got out of the car and tried to use my card at the pump, but the machine beeped angrily at me, refusing to process it. Great. I sighed and headed toward the store. As I pushed open the door, a small bell above it jingled, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. Inside, the place looked just as old and worn as the outside. The shelves were stocked with dusty snacks, cans of soup, and bottled water, but everything looked like it had been sitting there for a long time. At the counter, a man stood, hunched over with his back to me, his head bowed like he was staring down at something. I couldn't see his face, just a shock of gray hair sticking out from beneath a dirty baseball cap. His clothes were loose and ragged, and there was something about his posture that made me feel uneasy. "Hey," I called out, stepping up to the counter. "The pump outside won't take my card. Can you help me out?" He didn't move. Didn't even acknowledge I was there. "Excuse me?" I tried again, louder this time. "I just need to fill up my car." Still nothing. The man stayed completely still, like he hadn't even heard me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I forced myself to ignore it. Maybe he was hard of hearing or just really tired. I knocked lightly on the counter to get his attention. Sir?" Slowly, the man turned around. I wish he hadn't. His face was pale, almost waxy, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His eyes were sunken deep into their sockets, dull and lifeless, with dark circles underneath. But it was his expression that unnerved me the most. His lips were twisted into a strange, crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes, like someone had forced his face into that shape. For a moment he just stared at me, his smile frozen, his eyes wide and unblinking. Then in a voice that was barely more than a rasp, he said, "Fill it yourself." His words hung in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I wanted to ask him more, maybe try to get him to explain why the pumps weren't working properly. But something in his eyes told me to leave it alone. I forced a weak smile, nodded, and backed away toward the door. As I left the store, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. The man was still standing there, watching me through the dusty window, that crooked smile still plastered on his face. The uneasy feeling only grew stronger as I approached my car. I tried using the pump again, but this time, when I inserted my card, the machine made a loud, grinding sound before going silent. The screen stayed blank, as if the whole thing had just died. I cursed under my breath, about to head back inside and ask the creepy attendant for help again, when I noticed something odd. A car, an old, beat-up truck, was parked on the far side of the lot, near the edge of the woods that lined the station. It hadn't been there when I arrived, I was sure of it. The truck looked ancient, rusted through in places, with a cracked windshield and flat tires. But what bothered me more was that there was no one in it. I scanned the area, looking for any sign of the driver, but the lot was empty. The silence around me felt heavier now, almost suffocating. The gas station seemed darker, the lights dimmer than they had been just moments ago. A sudden wave of dread washed over me, and I had the overwhelming urge to leave. Forget the gas, forget everything. I needed to get out of there. I hurried back to my car, hoping I had enough fuel to make it to the next town. As I reached for the door handle, I heard a noise behind me, a low creaking sound like metal bending under pressure. Slowly, I turned around. The truck's door was open. My heart pounded in my chest. I could have sworn the door had been shut when I first saw the truck, but now it hung wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze that I hadn't even noticed before. I scanned the lot again, my eyes darting between the dark shadows cast by the old station and the trees beyond it. Still, no sign of anyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and started the engine. The car sputtered to life, the needle on the gas gauge hovering dangerously close to empty. I didn't care. I just needed to get as far away from that place as possible. As I pulled out of the lot and back onto the highway, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The gas station faded into the distance, swallowed by the darkness, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. I drove for what felt like hours, the road stretching endlessly ahead, the trees looming like dark sentinels on either side. My heart finally began to settle as the gas station faded from my mind, and I started to focus on finding the next town. But then, as I rounded a bend in the road, my headlights caught something up ahead. It was a gas station. At first, I thought it was a different one, but as I got closer, my blood ran cold. It was the same station, Miller's Gas, with its dim neon sign flickering in the night. The same 2 pumps, the same old, weathered building. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching on the asphalt. This couldn't be right. I had just left that place, and I'd been driving in a straight line for miles. There was no way I could have looped back without realizing it. But there it was, sitting in front of me like it had never left. I stared at it, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The lights flickered again, casting strange shadows across the lot. And then I saw it. The truck. The old, beat-up truck was parked in the exact same spot, near the edge of the woods. The door was still open, swaying slightly in the wind. My heart raced. I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew was that I needed to get out of there, fast. I slammed the car into reverse, backed up, and spun the wheel, heading in the opposite direction. I floored the gas pedal, the engine roaring as I sped down the highway, away from the station. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. It wasn't possible. None of it was possible. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, and for a split second, I thought I saw someone, standing by the side of the road, watching me. But when I looked again, there was nothing. I kept driving, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to look back. The dark highway stretched on forever, the trees pressing in from all sides. I wasn't sure where I was going anymore, or if I'd ever get there. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. Not again.